Good evening, gentlemen. I'm going to have a nice talk with you now on a very important topic. Won't take much of your time. I'm sure it's going to interest you a hell of a lot. I'm going to talk to you about the threat China is facing and how do we assess the Chinese in military tactics and warfare. Why I have decided to talk about China is because I've been reading and going through some videos by so-called experts and some Indian ex-officers who are creating what is, I would say, an awe of the Chinese army. In fact, one gentleman has gone and said that China is going to fight in a different domain, and that domain is going to be concerning artificial intelligence, cyber warfare, and there's no counter to that. I don't know how this good gentleman has reached this conclusion, because cyber warfare, artificial intelligence cannot win you the war. I will discuss this aspect as the video goes on, but let's look at what China is facing now. China is facing a two-front war at the moment in case it chooses to fight. What is that? The first is the American 7th Fleet and the Japanese Defense Force on the Eastern Pacific. And on the western side, they are facing India. And India has a border of almost 3,000 kilometers with China, and there are two major areas, that is Ladakh and Arunachal Pradesh, earlier known as Northeast Frontier Agency, where the Indian and Chinese army are eyeball to eyeball. So China is faced with a two-front war. There was a time when the Soviet Union was in existence and China had a long border and they were hostile to each other. There were border clashes also in 1969, and many Chinese died. Few Russians also died. But now China has made peace with Russia, has become the ally of Russia, mainly by twisting its tail, in the sense that the Russian economy has tanked. It's just about 60% of the GDP of India, so you can well imagine where Russia is now. The net result is the Chinese are propping up the Russians, and the Russians are saying, "Thank you, sir, we are with you." But though the Russian border is settled, it can erupt any time. I don't know. I won't talk about this now. I'm going to talk about it later. I'll give you some very interesting facts. What I'm going to talk about now is the border with India, the threat from here, and the threat from the 7th Fleet with the aircraft carriers. Now, if you remember, a look at history will tell us that during the Second World War, the Germans were mighty scared of having a two-front war. Field Marshal Schifflin, in one of his treatises, had said that if Germany has to be the master of Europe, it must fight only France first and neutralize Russia. And this is what Hitler did with the non-aggression pact, and he wiped out France within 40 days. They're all over for France. Now, the Schifflian plan was applicable to Europe, but I will stretch it to China. China cannot fight a two-front war. Now, thinking that the Pakistan side army is going to join China and attack India, I think this is a harebrained scheme. India is never going to face a two-front war. I don't think China and Pakistan can gel and fight India. Pakistan is so dependent on American and Saudi and UAE dollars, it cannot engage India. They won't let Pakistan attack India. That is one. And definitely an ally with China is out of question. I don't think so. There's a lot of talk going on, but India will not have a two-front war. I'm quite clear about it. Despite the opinion of the Indian Army Chief General, the ex-General Rawat. So now, as far as China is concerned, they got an Indian army facing them on the frontier here, and though the Indian army is not in the offensive mode. Now this I'll tell you, because when I was doing the staff college, we learned that the Indian army had one division facing China holding role, while the Chinese had correspondingly 5. But that has changed now. India is now matching troops to China. But at the same time, I don't think the Indians have really catered for strike course to enter inside Tibet. That is the saving grace for China. But all the same, in case China gets into battle, it will have to fight the Indian army and beat them. At the same time, they will have to fight the Americans and the 7th Fleet before they can take or gobble up Taiwan. It's not going to be easy. Now, the Chinese army is the biggest in the world. Yes, I accept it. The biggest standing army in the world. But 40% of the Chinese army are conscripts who come for 4 years and then go back. Now, listen very carefully to what I'm going to tell you now. It has something to do with demographics. About 50 years back, China enforced what we call the one China, one child policy. Now in China, there is a preference to have male children, like in other Eastern societies. So what was happening? More males were being born, lesser girls were coming. And those males who were born were the only sons of their families. And if that only son goes to the army and dies, what happens then? The lineage of that house, of that family is finished. It's over. This is a grave danger which China is facing, a tremendous danger. And that is the problem. It's leading to a moral problem, in my opinion. I remember when I was in Singapore, I met one of the Chinese whose son was on the border somewhere in Tibet, and he was very worried. He said, my son doesn't want to stay there, doesn't want to fight. He knows that if he dies, there's nobody else. Who's going to take over the family? Who's going to take forward the family name? And China has a male-dominated society. They are, in a way, son-oriented. They just want sons. The daughters don't want. So this is a bigger problem, and I fail to understand how some of the so-called military specialists have not been able to read this problem. Another problem with the Chinese army, let me tell you, is they haven't fought a war since 1979. The last time they fought was in Vietnam against them, and they didn't do anything spectacular. And that was in 79. So 44 years have elapsed, Chinese haven't gone into battle anywhere. Well, they can't quote the 62 war, which is now irrelevant, as well as what they did in Korea. That time the Chinese army was fresh after the civil war and they went into battle. But now they haven't fought. Their navy is totally out of touch with reality. Combat reality. They haven't fought a combat. They got 2 aircraft carriers, but these have only come in the last decade. In contrast, the Indian Navy has been operating aircraft carriers for the last 6 decades. And now India has built its own aircraft carrier, the indigenous one, the Vikrant. The Americans have got 2 super carriers. They got 11 carriers in all, and 2 of them are two of their super carriers are in the Eastern Pacific. And China has to fight them. And Chinese Navy has got no experience of any battle. They haven't fought a battle since 1949. I don't think they ever fought any battle any time at all. So now we come to the conclusion that how efficient is the Chinese army? What about the Air Force? Somebody asked me. Yeah, I'll tell you about the Air Force. Now Chinese have got the main so-called Chengdu, the J-20 and the J-31 fighters which have come in. They are carbon copies. They tried to do some reverse engineering, but they are not up to the mark. They claim the Chengdu is the 5th generation fighter. I don't think it's anything close to that. Then the Chinese have great limitations of operations in Tibet. The average height of the Tibetan plateau is 10,000 feet, right? And when an aircraft has to operate from that airfield, as an Air Force man, I will tell you, the payload, the thrust, everything is greatly reduced. The efficacy of the plane operating from an altitude of 10,000 feet goes down. And India will be operating, the Indian Air Force would be operating from places which are very close to the border and planes and would definitely have the edge. Secondly, China does not have the air defense or the amphibious capability to launch an invasion against Taiwan. In 9 cases out of 10, the Chinese know the invasion will flounder. That is why they are watching the Ukraine battle with great interest and seeing that the so-called Red Army, which is supposed to be one of the most professional and best army in the world, is really turned out to be a damn squib. The Chinese cannot forget the thrashing they got from Japan in the Second World War. And they haven't forgotten it, so they want to take revenge. Japan is militarizing, is going to do away with its pacifist constitution. And what is going to happen? The point is, there is going to be a two-front danger to China. I think the Chinese are very shrewd, they have realized this, so they want to needle up to a point but not cross the precipice. They are going to provoke America, they want to provoke a fight with India also. They don't want to fight, they want to get their bread and butter without fighting. That's not going to happen. It used to happen sometime back when Nehru gifted away Tibet, he gifted away a lot of territories like Aksai Chin and all, and then said that not a blade of grass grows there, some silly comment. But then this is part of life, you got to be very careful here. Now the question which arises is the capability of the Chinese armed forces. The Navy is the biggest in the world, but by being the biggest doesn't mean it is the best. it is the biggest, yes, but they got 2 aircraft carriers which don't match the American fleet at all. Even India has got 2 aircraft carriers. That is number 1. They have got no amphibious capability. Number 3, they haven't fought a war for the last 70 years. Chinese Navy done nothing other than sailing the sea here and there. And then coming to the Air Force, I think that is their Achilles heel. In Tibet, those aircraft will not be able to operate at full strength, and we have seen in various combats which took place between the Chinese pilots and the Americans in the Korean War, the ratio was 1:4. 1 American plane to 4 Chinese were lost. So we are coming to a situation where the Chinese military is not all that hot. It is good, mind you. I will just quote Field Marshal Montgomery. He had visited China as a guest of the People's Republic, and he came back and wrote a book. I remember reading that quite a few years back. In that he had said, defeating China in China is impossible. He says the West should never think of fighting inside China. Now China is a formidable power, no doubt about it, but you can't antagonize the dragon and fight in China and defeat them. They got very strong defenses, but as far as the offense is concerned, that is where the Chinese are going to get into deep trouble. Another point which somebody has made is the Chinese got a lot of artificial intelligence, cyber warfare, and they will use that to great advantage. They will jam the frequencies, they will do that. I think let's not go into the world of Star Wars. No war has been won just by artificial intelligence or by robots or by anything else. Cyber warfare, no. Nobody's been able to win a war. Why? If you go to the principles of war and the 10th principle which has been enunciated by Field Marshal Viscount Montgomery in his History of Warfare, one thing stands out. And what is that? In any war, mark my word, in any war you need the infantry soldier to hold the ground. Now, who's going to contest this statement of the great field marshal? Some of these chaps sitting and talking about cyber warfare. You have robots going in, fair enough. You have cyber warfare, but then once you win, who's the person who's going to go and take possession of that area? This is the infantry soldier. You've got to have the strong infantry. So that is again the problem with the Chinese. Now, my reading of the situation is, in the Ladakh, where the temperatures come to 40 and 50 degrees minus centigrade, the Chinese soldiers were greatly handicapped in the sense they had never seen such an atmosphere to fight. And the Chinese started sending in robotic warfare, robo soldiers and all floating around in the snow. Good, very nice. But what is the utility? Robos going around, well, yes, but somebody's got to follow them. Once the robots make a break or whatever, if at all they do, it's again the infantry soldier who has to move in. And if there's no soldier going in, how could you win the war? I mean, you can't have just drones running, bombing, that's the end of it and all that, You need the soldier to take control of the thing. So I think most of these military pundits, these so-called specialists, are really missing the wood from the trees. I mean, you could see in totality. You can't just say the China's got a lot of capability in cyber warfare and they're going to win the war. They're going to win anything. Another thing which we must understand is the Soviet army beat the Germans because the Russians are a very patriotic people. They fought for their country. But when you're not fighting for your country and you're fighting a war which has got no meaning, the morale of the army is not there to fight, and that's what's happening in Ukraine. The Russian army, it's supposed to be one of the most professional armies in the world, has got bogged down. They had to retreat from Kyiv and Kharkiv. They had to say, hands up, we don't want to come there now. We come in the Donbass region. Why? Because the soldiers were not convinced that the battle is for the motherland, for the fatherland, for Russia. It is just an aimless war. And the Chinese young men, soldiers, are going to feel the same way in due course of time, when they will not be able to make any headway in anywhere, whether in Formosa or even in Ladakh or something like that. They're going to ask the question, what the hell are we fighting for? So they would fight if China is threatened. Yes, they will fight if Shanghai or Beijing or something happens. But I don't think the Chinese population or the soldiers are very keen about going and fighting somewhere else, And that is also where America lost, actually. Despite all the hype, one of the main reasons which they lost in Vietnam was there were so many people questioning, why are we fighting in Vietnam? So many were saying, why are we fighting in Afghanistan? So this is a very important point. And the Americans had the best of cyber intelligence. They are very good at cyber warfare, very advanced, yet they went and lost. They had satellite coverage, everything. So let's not generalize things and just say, well, China is a very powerful country. Yes, it is powerful. But China will take another decade to come up, and by that time we do not know what's going to happen in China. I mean, who could have seen, when I was in school, that the Soviet Union would collapse? It was a monolith power. Brezhnev was like a tiger moving around here and there. And then suddenly one fine day I woke up and told and there's a chap called Gorbachev, and that was the end of Soviet Russia. China is running into a similar syndrome. The Chinese basically are dominated by the Han. They are occupied Tibet. People don't want to be with them. They occupied Xinjiang. There's a low-grade guerrilla warfare on there by the Muslims. And so many people. And China is a ruthless state. You won't recollect that about 4,000 men, young boys, were just shot dead by the Chinese army way back in 1989 in the Tiananmen Square massacre. So I do not rate China as on the highest platform as far as war is concerned. Chinese have got a strong economy, they've got a strong military, they've got a very strong defense, but I don't think their offensive capability is a match to their defensive capability. So, gentlemen, we should not all of us, just reach a conclusion and say, well, China is one of the greatest powers, it's so and so and all that. I am all for it. China is a power, no doubt about it. Its economy is the second biggest in the world, no doubt about it. But it is not capable of fighting a two-front war. And that is the crucial answer to this question. And China must be thinking that they can corner and fight India alone. It will not happen. Americans will not allow India to be defeated. And Americans will not allow Pakistan to join China and attack India. So as far as I am concerned, India is not going to face a two-front war. India may have a border war with China. That is a possibility. But again, if the Chinese are wise, as they say the Chinese are supposed to be very wise, with a civilization 4,000 years, they won't entangle with India. It's not worth it. Well, gentlemen, I think I've come to the end of what I had to say, and I hope you understood what I've been trying to point out. Let's not think that China is an ogre or something, which has created a lot of problems in the world and China cannot be faced. No, China will be faced. China has got a good army, good forces, but they are all in the defensive in the nature. Their offensive capability is not up to what is required. Thank you, gentlemen. I close now, and I hope you like this video. Obviously, if you like it, please subscribe and share it with your friends. And I close now. Jai Hind, and God bless you all. And what am I going to do now? I'm going to have a glass of beer. It's a beer. Okay? All the best. Take care and God bless.